Hey everyone, welcome back to all my listeners. This is episode 6 in season 11. Today is Wednesday, February 7th, 2024. My name is Sonal Patel, and this is the Paint the Medical Picture podcast series. Now, it's a brand new month, and I wanted to roll out another new series that I've developed, my Spotlight series on my guests. Today's Newsworthy features Beth Schleeper's journey. I'm going to roll out the red carpet once again and shine my spotlight on her. And of course, our conversations together provides plenty of trusty tips and wise words as well. Let's get into it. All right, so I've got my very good friend on today for the latest podcast drop. This is season 11, episode number 6 that we're already on. Can you believe it? So I wanted to welcome my guest, who I'm going to be spotlighting for the next couple of episodes in a series that I want to focus on my guests' experience, their journey, where they're going to next, as well as showcasing what their expertise is in this particular niche of healthcare coding, auditing, billing, compliance. So I know you've heard her name throughout the industry. This is Beth Schleeper from Advanced Coding Services. So welcome, Beth. I'm so happy to have you on today.
I am so excited, and congratulations on 11 seasons. You are amazing. I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of you, and I'm proud for you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was a work in progress years ago, right? I was a little bit intimidated, as we all are, right, to get ourselves out there, get the message out. But, it was Brian Quee who really pushed me over the cliff on an interview I had done with him probably 4 years ago or so. And he was the one who really encouraged me to go ahead and get out there and do a podcast of my own. Why not? We need more voices in the industry. So I took the plunge, and you know what? I really, really enjoyed doing it. And my most favorite episodes are the ones where I can interact with guests. And so that is what I want to do much more of as the seasons progress. And in general, where I have brought on guests, they are industry icons, right? They are leaders, or they are people who are up and coming in a particular niche. And so for today, I know you and I have known each other for quite some time, but I wanted my guests to know more about you, right? The audience needs to be aware of who Beth Schleeper is. So, I would love to know more about what your journey is in this particular space. How did you get to where you are today as a business owner? Because in fact, you are one at Advanced Coding Services. So I'd love to hear you talk about it.
Well, so it goes back a long way. I actually was working at an answering service, and that was way back in the day, right?
Yeah.
We don't do those anymore. But I was working in an answering service, and one of the clients that we had was a doctor, and his receptionist, his office manager said, "We're looking for a new receptionist. We love what you do here. Would you interview for us?" And I said, "Sure." And I went and interviewed, got the job, and I was the receptionist. I'm at the front desk checking people in, collecting copays. I was there probably 2 weeks, and the doctor and the office manager had this huge fight. She left. He comes out, throws things on my desk, and said, "Do you know how to do billing?"
Wow. No.
Right.
No.
He goes, "I'm sending you to school. You're going to figure it out." Okay, I'll learn. And I didn't actually go to school. He hired the girl from the office next door. She'd come in and talk to me.
Okay.
She talked to me about medical necessity. If you you can't bill an EKG unless you have a reason for it, like chest pain or that kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense. And then he would just send me to all those lunch and learns back in the day. And I was probably 10, 12 years as a biller coder, working in the industry before I finally sat for my CPC exam. And I just did it to see if I could do it. But I worked for him for a while. We parted ways when I was pregnant with my son. We had some disagreements there. I worked for a DME company. I worked for them when I had my son and even a little after. But for me, my son was my gift.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to pay other people to raise
Mm-hmm.
my gift.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to miss on that opportunity.
Right.
And so I said to my dad, who owned a business, he owned a fairly good sized tax and accounting service. And I said, Dad, I need to figure this out. And he said, and that was at my lunch hour. And he said, Beth, come at me with a business plan and we'll figure this out. I called my husband and said, let's figure this out. I kind of doodled through the rest of the afternoon. He picked me up. We went to my parents' house for supper. We had a business meeting, and T&T Consulting was launched.
Mm-hmm.
We launched T&T Consulting. It's a full service revenue cycle management company. We do taxes and accounting, front office consulting, the whole shebang there.
Yes. Wow.
And we had externs that would come in from those big box schools, because we wanted to share and help teach and mentor the next crop of coders and builders. And so many of them, we were so frustrated and disappointed that people were like, I'm sitting for my CPC exam. They didn't know what an EOB was. They didn't know how to look up a code. They didn't know what medical necessity. They didn't know these things. And so one of our goals, one of our business goals was, at some point we wanted to start a billing and coding school where we could teach people and really teach people how to be coders, how to be billers, that they could come out knowing their industry. And he passed away in 2012, and I just decided that was going to now be my goal. That was my priority, was to get that school going. And in 2015, June 1st, my birthday, June 1st of 2015, I acquired Advanced Coding Services, and never looked back. And it's just, we have grown and blossomed and flourished. We teach coding, we teach billing, all of those things, so that my goal is that when people come out of my school, they say, I went to Advanced Coding Services, and that's a good thing. We start to gain that reputation of, oh, you went to Advanced Coding Services, then I know you know what you're doing, because you were taught the right stuff and you learned the right stuff. It wasn't just figure out how to find a code kind of stuff. So that's kind of how we started. Was, I was working at an answering service, and then it just kind of snowballed.
Right.
As life takes you, you keep going and going and going. And T&T Consulting is now celebrating. We just celebrated 26 years in business.
Oh my goodness.
This year will be my 9th year with the school.
Fantastic, Beth. My gosh, those are such huge achievements, right? Incredible. So, I've been hearing so many people's stories, right? And that's where it all starts. And, if I had to total up everyone's conversations that, I've been privileged enough to have, no one just became a coder, right? They had a circuitous pathway in, right? So yours happened to be an answering service, right? And I do say that all the time to people who are fresh, people who are new, people who are starting out, right? Where do they get their first job?
Right.
And like you said, you have to start anywhere. Like in your case, it was answering service, right? That's something that you do. That's incredible to understand the whole cycle, right? It's something that you can gain an understanding of how to talk to patients on the phone, right? Those types of answering services might not be as opportune in today's newer landscape, but there are answering services that are still available in the hospital space. Right. So that's a great idea for people to start applying for.
Like
they just
centers.
Call services, call centers, things like that. It's a really, really good way to get your foot in the door. So as I was hearing you talk, I just sort of went back in my mind thinking of everyone else's experiences that I've, had the honor to talk to. And you're right. People do start anywhere. There is something that's thrown in their lap. And when you're young and starting out, I always advise you have to stay hungry and go ahead and take those opportunities, right? You don't have to say no to things simply because they aren't coding related, right? They don't necessarily apply to your certificate or your education program, etc. You should go ahead and look rather seriously at this particular job opportunity because it is a pathway in to the billing and the coding end of things. Because once you're on the inside, right, you can always put a bug in someone's ear and have that conversation that, hey, I do have my CPC credential and I could be really, really valuable here if there's an opening that happens to come up, so really, really great to learn about your experience from the past and look at where it's taken you, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, and
huge.
As a young girl, and I say young, I mean, I was 22.
Yeah, you were young. Absolutely.
Yeah. At that age, I had no idea what billing and coding even was.
Absolutely. Right.
I was working at the answering service. I was the receptionist for the doctor. I was the face. I was the front face that patients would see. Yeah. And 2 weeks later, I was not that anymore. I was something else. Right. That was not my intention, but that became my journey. And
exactly.
Here I am, 25, 26 years later.
Exactly. And
I own my own business and my own school. And it's not where I set out for, but it's where I am.
Exactly.
And I don't know that I know what I had visions for myself. It wasn't this, but this is where I am.
I love it. That is so true, right? Because we're both at the same point in our lives, mid-lives here, right? And we literally, if you asked us 25 years ago, I agree with you completely. I would not have said that this is where I would be. Absolutely not, right?
I had no idea.
Had no idea 25 years ago that life could take so many twists and turns to present so many opportunities, take a lot of them away, right? Where we had to actually make, concrete choices of what our next steps were going to be. So that's so well said, because when you do reach midlife, mid-career, you are literally reflecting back on your journey as well. And so, I think we do have a lot of things that we can offer in terms of advice, in terms of mentoring to the newer, younger people that are in today's time are well aware of what, this type of financial side of healthcare is actually about. Because you made a really great point there that back in the day, nobody knew what the billing and the coding people were in healthcare. That idea simply wasn't talked about. Right. Even though those folks existed, there weren't really carved out terms for them, as in entire departments were dedicated to the financial aspects, the business side of healthcare that we're well aware of today in 2024. So yeah, you gave the audience so many great insights into, what your initial entryway can actually progress into and change into. So I think it's rather incredible. And I love hearing you talk about advanced coding services and the education, front that you provide as well. Because I agree with you, there's so many new coders that, yes, even though they might have that credential, they still don't understand. And we're going to get into this as I bring you on again and again, so we understand what your expertise is, right? But there are so many people who do have that certificate where, it doesn't really matter if you don't understand the reimbursement, the whole rev cycle portion of what the CPC is actually doing, right? It's inherent in the CPC credential, but they don't actually know the bells and whistles of it because they're not taught that.
Right.
They're simply taught the coding. So I know we'll get into that as the season goes on, but there's so much to consider that organizations like yourself, companies like you, do provide that higher level education that might be missing in other types of programs. So I think it's incredible. I think it's simply incredible. Yeah. So kudos to you.
We make sure, I want to make sure that all of our students earn their CP. My intent is if I can teach you to be a coder, then you'll pass your exam. I don't teach you to pass the exam. I teach you to be a coder. And if I've done my job well, you should pass the exam.
Exactly.
That's our perspective on that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, people do have to recognize that through any organization, these programs are rigorous. I myself have shared this in the past about how long it took me to, you know, get the background materials in healthcare, because I did not come, in fact, from a science background whatsoever. I came from the world of humanities. And so I decided way back in 2008, 2009, to go ahead and take a full year for a certificate program that I found way back in the day, you know, that really, really forced me to understand anatomy, terminology, pathophysiology, the pharmacology, everything I had to understand. And I knew I couldn't, you know, wish myself to do it faster in a 6-month type of a program, because I didn't have the core sciences, right? I came from arts and humanities and things like that. So I really wanted to take that time to really dig in so I could eventually pass a credential like a CMC or a CPC, right? So I think folks in the audience need to understand that you do have to have some sort of a background in the sciences before you try and get these types of positions.
Well, I always encourage, I tell my students, can I get you through this book, the textbook? Can I get you through this textbook faster than 16 or 20 weeks? I can, but that doesn't mean that you understood it. There is a lot of material. It is very intense. And sometimes a chapter a week is too much for some people, because there's just, you have to learn anatomy and your ICD-10s and your CPTs and you know, comorbidities and such, that sometimes even a week is not long enough to do a chapter. So when they're like, oh, I can get through this in 3 weeks. Yeah, you can. But did you learn anything?
Right. Exactly.
That's
exactly.
Did you learn anything?
There's so much of that I think the student has to do a lot of legwork on their own as well, right? So yes, your course teaches them to pass the CPC, right? That's wonderful. But the student has to also do a lot of the legwork behind the scenes as well, right? Put in a lot of that extra time on their own to help themselves pass this CPC, right? I think students do have to be well aware of that as well. And then, like we keep honing at, just because you pass your credential, your test, and then you receive that credential doesn't mean that you know the ins and outs of what goes on in a coding position, right? That's something that's so talked about, is it really is that experience that's going to help you understand all of the things that actually go in to a billing office. Like all of your job descriptions are above and beyond what that certificate program has taught you.
And it depends on your employer. You know, if you work for a small mom and pop doc, then maybe you are the coder, the biller, the office manager, the receptionist. Maybe you are all of them. But maybe you work for a larger practice and you work in a call center, and the coders and the billers are two separate departments and they don't speak. I mean, it just depends on your employer. And yes, your job description. Not all coding and billing situations are going to be the same. They're, you know, a cardiologist's office is going to be very different than a nephrologist's office. You have to know how to handle each of those specialties, but know what your role is before you accept that position.
Absolutely.
If you're not good at coding, then you probably shouldn't take the coding position without some further homework, if we will. Study some more to hone in on those specialties to make sure that you are proficient at coding those specialties.
Absolutely. Know your role. That's a great pro tip, right? Know your role. Don't just accept a job or try and apply for a job that you don't know about, right? Like cardiology, one of the hardest topics to code, in my opinion. One of the most difficult pathways, right? So if you're trying to apply for that type of a position, you better be a solid cardiology coder, right? Don't just apply to everything under the sun because you have your CPC, right? You have to actually really go into your results of that CPC exam, because the AAPC will give you those nuggets broken down, like how did you score on these particular sections, right? If you did really, really well on the integumentary world, you should maybe look for a job at a dermatology practice, right? Instead of that very difficult cardio section, which you might not have scored as high on, just for example. But that's a great pro tip. Know your role. Absolutely.
And I always tell my students to figure out, we're going to go through all systems of the body. Figure out what are you passionate about? What really speaks to your soul? Cardiology, you will not catch me on purpose applying for a position or billing or coding for a cardiologist. You're just not on purpose. Will I do that? Pediatricians, pediatrics, family practice, GPs, I mean, all day, every day, I can do those in my sleep. And I love that. But I love pediatrics because that just speaks to my heart. So that's my specialty. That's really where my heart is. But dermatology, if skin is really of interest to you, then yes, maybe you look at dermatology, look at where these go. And sometimes it's where you want to go, but sometimes it's where your journey takes you.
Yes.
And it might not be where you wanted, but it is where you end up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another great piece of advice, right? Your journey may take you somewhere, but absolutely, you better be passionate about where that journey takes you, right? You better learn, embrace that new place that you've entered into, right? Because some of these things do, like you stated, just fall into your lap, right? So when you're ready, don't be scared. Just take that leap of faith that this has come into your lap for a reason.
Right.
So you should go ahead and take it.
Well,
and step up to the plate. Yeah.
Right. Like if I wouldn't apply for a cardiology position, but if one fell in my lap, you bet your bottom dollar that I would study and figure it out to be the best biller coder I could be for that practice. Because at the end of the day, I have personally grown and learned more than I would have if I hadn't taken that position. So it's not a lose position for me. It's a win-win because I have grown and stretched myself personally and expanded my own education. That's not a bad idea. It's not a bad gig.
Exactly. Oh, I love that. Absolutely. Yeah. You've got to be able to stretch yourself.
Right.
Totally agree, Beth. Wow. Well, I think you've given the audience some really, really great insights into your journey and that anything is possible, right? From your very young age of starting out in an answering service, right? And then lo and behold, right? These two huge opportunities for TNT consulting, which you've now had for like 26 years.
Yes.
That is immense, right? And that's your billing end of things, your practice management end of things. It's that arm of your company. Right. And then you've had your advanced coding services company as well, which is focused all on the education side of things. And so that's incredible that you're that multifaceted, right? Having started out at such a young age in your 20s from answering services. So I think the audience can definitely take away here that so much can change in a lifetime.
Right.
So much can change, and you can grow with those times like you did in your situation. Simply remarkable journey.
Well, I thank you. But I also think that we need to remember that just because this is where we start doesn't mean that that's where you're going to end. And so take that role as the receptionist, take that role in this call center as the answering service, because you don't know where that's going to lead. And at the very least, you will have learned something, even if it's just a better understanding of how the practice works behind the scenes, so that you can then continue to grow and be a better biller, coder, team player for that practice or another practice, so that you can continue to grow. And again, it's education, and that never serves us bad.
Exactly right. I just wanted to put up a little blurb here on where people can find you and your company, right, at advancedcodingservices.com.
Yes.
So you're absolutely right. You can take your strengths anywhere you go, any position, and take it and go elsewhere and continue growing, right? You don't have to stay put in one position, in one company, in one organization. You're allowed to escalate and elevate yourself as the years go by, and continue, of course, as we know in this particular space, we have to embrace education throughout our lifetime. We cannot stay stuck on that knowledge that we learned at 22, right? We have to keep learning year after year after year and make those investments in ourselves, those continued investments, so we can help along everyone's path that we encounter, right? We're not only helping ourselves with continuing education, but we're helping those in our path as well.
Well, and I heard somebody say, and this is very true, that in this industry, when we're talking about billing, coding, the business of medicine, in this industry, the one constant is change. Our code books change every year. Our code sets change every year. There's always changes to our guidelines, our rules, our regulations, our payer fee schedules. The constant is change. And so we have to continue to go and grow with that. I mean, the codes that we used last year are not the codes we're using this year. The reimbursement amounts we got last year are not the reimbursements we're getting this year. And so you just have to continue to ebb and flow with this change.
Absolutely, Beth. Absolutely. I think we're going to pick up on our next conversation right there in terms of change is always a constant in healthcare. Absolutely. We'll pick up right from there. But I know you have to go. You're a very busy person, always on the go, always working. Yes. So I just wanted to thank you so much for sharing with my audience about your journey, because it is remarkable and inspirational. And I really do hope that people will get a lot of great takeaways from hearing more about you and your experiences. So I wanted to thank you so much. And I am going to welcome you back time and time again here, because I know you have so much to share for this audience.
Well, I appreciate your time, and I am so honored to be a guest. And thank you so much. And I look forward to hearing and seeing you again.
Thanks so much, Beth. I'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
So that wraps up today's episode. And as always, I appreciate you all diving into today with me. If you want more information from me, please go ahead and follow me on LinkedIn. I'll leave links to everything in the show notes below. Now, don't forget, you guys, and remember to catch my LinkedIn Live broadcast with Betty Hovey this Friday for our Compliance Capers Fireside Chat. Now, this week, it's going to be on a favorable OIG advisory opinion. And don't forget, you can catch up and watch all of them on my YouTube channel for Paint the Medical Picture. Don't forget, that link is in my show notes. Now, I wish you guys all an amazing and very, very happy week ahead. Thank you guys so much for listening on today's very special episode, and I hope every week with me brings you closer to helping your providers paint a masterpiece. See you next Wednesday.